When people ask me about my childhood, I always say it was perfect as long as you ignored the missing pieces. But honestly, I never really felt the absence of my dad. Martha, my mom, was more than enough. She worked day and night, juggling her shifts as an ER doctor while somehow still managing to pack my lunch and help me with my science projects. And then there was Lily, my little ray of sunshine. She was the reason I never felt lonely. We were a team, the three of us. Martha was our rock, always keeping everything together, even when things got tough. But life wasn't always easy. I remember the nights when I'd hear her crying in her room after she thought we were asleep. She never let us see that side of her, but I knew how much she gave up for us. My dad, Richard, walked out when I was barely old enough to understand words like abandonment and betrayal. But Martha, she made sure I never had to feel the weight of that rejection. We lived in a modest apartment back then. Martha put herself through medical school while working part-time and raising us. By the time she graduated, we had already moved into a better neighborhood and things started looking up. She built a name for herself in the medical field, eventually landing a high-profile position at one of the best hospitals in the city. We finally had stability, and I was so proud of her. But just when I thought life had given us a break, he came back, foreshadowing the return. I should have known it was too good to last. Life has a funny way of bringing back the people you'd rather leave behind. Richard showed up one day, like a ghost from a past I'd long buried. He waltzed back into our lives, all smiles and charm, claiming he wanted to make things right. Yeah, right. The timing was suspicious. Just as Martha's career skyrocketed and we moved into a sleek high-rise apartment, Richard suddenly remembered he had a family. Convenient. My initial doubts, I wasn't buying it. Lily was too young to see through his act, but I wasn't. He wasn't there when we needed him. Now that we were finally doing okay, he wanted back in. It didn't sit right with me. But Martha, she still had that softness for him. I could see it in her eyes when she talked about how people change. I didn't want to break her heart by telling her what I really thought. So I kept my mouth shut. Enter Clara, the catalyst for chaos. And then came Clara. If Richard was the spark, Clara was the gasoline. She was younger, polished, and knew exactly how to play the game. She slid into our lives so smoothly that it was almost impressive. Almost. She had this way of making Martha feel small while pretending to be her best friend. And Richard, he was too blinded by whatever spell she cast to see it. But I saw it. I saw through all of it. You know that gut feeling? The one that whispers, something's not right, but you try to ignore it because you don't want to be the paranoid one? Yeah, I should have listened to it. For weeks, I'd been watching Richard and Clara weave their web around Martha, pulling her in tighter every day. But it wasn't until everything unraveled that I realized just how deep their scheme went. Signs I ignored. It started with small things. Clara suggesting better financial management and pushing Martha to consolidate her assets. Then came Richard's idea to open a joint account for emergencies. He said, right, emergencies like funding his lavish lifestyle. I overheard Clara once, whispering on the phone when she thought no one was around. He's almost there, she said. I didn't know who she was talking to, but the way she said it, I knew it wasn't good. The breaking point, the day everything fell apart, started like any other. Martha was at work, Lily was at school, and I was home early from the office. I was planning to surprise Lily with her favorite pizza when I heard voices coming from the study. Richard and Clara, arguing. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when you hear your mom's name in a conversation about timing and documents, you listen. Why hasn't she signed the papers yet? Clara hissed, her voice low but sharp. She's hesitant, Richard replied. I told you she needs more time. Time is running out, Richard. We need that money before the quarter ends. Money. My blood ran cold. They weren't just after her love. They were after her money. The documents that changed everything. I waited until they left before going into the study. The papers were right there on the desk. Legal jargon, thick with clauses and loopholes. But the gist was clear. A transfer of assets from Martha to Richard. If she signed, he'd have control over everything. Her savings, the house, even the trust fund she'd set up for Lily and me. I felt sick. Clara had been slowly chipping away at Martha's confidence, making her doubt her own judgment. And Richard? He was playing the supportive partner, pushing just enough to make her think it was her own idea. They were orchestrating everything, the final straw, throwing away Dad's memories. But what sent me over the edge, they got rid of Dad's things. I came home one day to find the garage empty. Every box, every photo, every memory of my father gone. Clara thought it was time for a fresh start, Richard said, casually, like he was talking about rearranging furniture, not erasing my dad's existence. That was it, the final straw. My decision, no more waiting. I stood in that empty garage, fists clenched so tight, my nails dug into my palms. They crossed a line. They wanted to wipe out my dad's legacy. They wanted to take everything Martha worked for. Not on my watch. I wasn't a kid anymore. I was a damn software engineer. I didn't just know how to code. I knew how to dig up dirt, analyze data, and follow digital trails. If they wanted a game, I was ready to play, gathering evidence. The slow burn, I started small. First, I went through Richard's emails. Guess what? He wasn't as careful as he thought. His inbox was a goldmine of shady deals and manipulative conversations. He was lining up buyers for some of Martha's properties before she had even signed the transfer. Clara's fingerprints were all over it. She had connections with real estate developers and was negotiating under the table. They were planning to sell Martha's assets for a hefty commission. The digital footprint that would ruin them then. I dug deeper. Venmo transactions. Clara was sending money to someone named DM regularly. A little digging revealed DM was a private investigator. Why would Clara need a pie? I hacked into her cloud storage, don't ask me how. Let's just say I know my way around cybersecurity. What I found, surveillance photos of Martha. They were tracking her, her routines, her habits, everything. These weren't just gold diggers. They were orchestrating a complete takeover. Piecing it all together, I connected the dots. Richard played the emotional angle, gaining Martha's trust. Clara manipulated her surroundings, isolating her from friends and family. The pie kept tabs on her movements, ensuring nothing went off script. It was a well-oiled machine. But they underestimated one thing, me, formulating my plan, revenge in motion. I wasn't just going to stop them. I was going to destroy them. I copied every email, transaction, and document. I created a digital dossier so airtight that not even Richard's best lawyer could wiggle out of it. But that wasn't enough. Public humiliation. That's what they deserved. They built their lies in front of an audience. So I was going to burn it all down in front of one, foreshadowing what's coming. I set everything in motion. A few emails to the right people, a few well-timed leaks, and an invitation to a charity gala where all their friends would be present. By the time I was done, Richard and Clara wouldn't just lose Martha's money, they'd lose everything. You know that moment in a movie when the villain is grinning, thinking they've won, and then, boom, everything crashes down around them. Yeah, that's exactly what I had planned for Richard and Clara. But this wasn't a movie. This was real life, and I wasn't leaving room for a sequel. The stage was set. After weeks of digging, gathering evidence, and tying every loose end, I was ready. Richard and Clara had been orchestrating their little scheme for months, but they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated me. I had emails, bank statements, and real estate contracts that painted the perfect picture of their greed. But what really tied it all together? The surveillance photos. I still remember the night I found them. Images of my mom, Lily, and me, tracked like we were some kind of investment portfolio. That's when I knew. They weren't just after money. They wanted to control everything. My plan, layered and unstoppable. I wasn't going to just expose them. I was going to make sure they never recovered. The plan had 3 phases: legal destruction, evidence of fraud, misrepresentation, and coercion sent to Martha's lawyer and law enforcement. Public humiliation, a perfectly timed reveal at an elite charity gala where all their friends and business associates would be present. Financial ruin, freezing their assets before they could make a single move. I didn't leave a single crack for them to slip through. Phase 1, legal checkmate. The first domino fell with an anonymous tip to the Attorney General's office. Fraud, misrepresentation, attempted theft. The whole 9 yards. Martha's lawyer, Mr. Bennett, was more than happy to help. He hated Richard with a passion. I gave him the evidence, and within 48 hours there was a formal investigation underway. I've never seen something this airtight, Bennett said, a gleam in his eye that told me he was ready for blood. Phase 2. The gala. The perfect trap now. This was where things got fun. The annual Hope and Hearts Charity Gala. Black tie, exclusive guest list, and attended by every big name in the city. It was the kind of event where reputations were built or destroyed. Richard and Clara loved the spotlight, so when I suggested to Martha that she should invite them, they couldn't resist. They thought it was just another opportunity to flaunt their success. Oh, how wrong they were. Countdown to chaos, the night of the gala. Everything was set. Mr. Bennett was there, armed with documents. Lily was at home with Olivia and George, safe and away from the storm. I was ready, waiting in the shadows. Richard and Clara walked into the ballroom like royalty, arrogant, confident, completely unaware of what was coming. I kept my distance, watching as they mingled and charmed their way through the crowd. Smile now, Richard. It's your last one. The moment of truth, an hour into the event, the moment arrived. The gala's host called Richard to the stage to present a special donation. It was all part of the script they had planned to boost Richard's public image. Perfect. As Richard took the mic, I gave Mr. Bennett the signal. A hush fell over the crowd as the large projector behind the stage flickered to life. And then the truth unfolded, exposing their lies. Public execution image after image filled the screen. Emails between Richard and Clara discussing asset transfers. Photos from the private investigator tracking Martha's movements. Bank statements showing shady transactions. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Whispers spread like wildfire. Richard froze mid-sentence, his confident smile melting into panic. Clara's face turned ghostly white. "What is this?" someone in the crowd asked, their voice dripping with disbelief. "It looks like fraud," another murmured. And then Mr. Bennett stepped forward, documents in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice calm but deadly, "what you're seeing tonight is just the tip of the iceberg." The room erupted. Richard's collapse. Richard tried to recover. "This is a misunderstanding," he stammered, but no one was buying it. Clara was already edging toward the exit, but security was waiting for her. "Leaving so soon?" I murmured under my breath as I watched her panic. "Not today, Clara." Phase 3, freezing their assets. While the public humiliation was satisfying, I wasn't done yet. I'd already worked with Martha's legal team to freeze every account Richard and Clara had access to. Every dime they planned to siphon, gone. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late. The fallout, a public meltdown. Richard's meltdown was one for the ages. He begged, he threatened, he even tried to charm his way out of it. But the evidence spoke louder than his lies. Clara, she crumbled faster than a house of cards. She tried to blame Richard, throwing him under the bus the moment things went south. Classic. But none of it mattered. The endgame, destroyed beyond repair. By the end of the night, Richard and Clara were financially ruined, socially exiled, and facing serious legal consequences. Their friends? Gone. Their reputations? Shredded. And Martha? Safe. Finally, the aftermath. Silence never sounded so sweet. When it was all over, I stood outside the gala, breathing in the cool night air. I checked my phone. A message from Mr. Bennett. "They're finished. Completely." I allowed myself a small smile. Checkmate. Silence. It's funny how something so simple can feel so powerful. For the first time in what felt like forever, the house was quiet. No more hushed arguments behind closed doors. No more tense dinners with forced smiles. Just peace. Picking up the pieces. In the days after the gala, things moved fast. Richard and Clara tried to spin the situation, of course. It was a misunderstanding, Richard claimed, but no one was buying it. By the time the media got hold of the evidence, their reputations were in ashes. Every major news outlet ran the story. Wealthy entrepreneur caught in fraud scheme was plastered everywhere. Clara disappeared first. She packed her designer bags and bolted, leaving Richard to clean up the mess. Typical. Richard? He fought harder, but when the court froze his assets and launched an official investigation, he didn't have many moves left. His empire crumbled overnight. And just like that, they were gone. Martha's strength returns Martha, though. She was stronger than ever. Once the dust settled, she took back control of her life. She hired the best lawyers to ensure that Richard couldn't come near her or her assets ever again. Every loophole was closed. Every potential threat neutralized. I watched her rebuild herself piece by piece. Martha wasn't just surviving now. She was thriving. Lily's smile came back, and then there was Lily. It was like watching the light come back into her eyes. Without Richard and Clara poisoning the air, she was herself again. She'd spend hours working on her robotics projects, and when she wasn't doing that, she'd beg me to take her to the tech lab at the community center. "One day, I'm going to build something that changes the world," she told me, eyes shining with determination. And I believed her, because Lily had the heart of a fighter, a new beginning, moving forward. But the real turning point? We moved. Martha decided we needed a fresh start, away from the memories that haunted that house. A sleek, modern apartment in the heart of the city. It was smaller, but it felt lighter, cleaner. We didn't need a mansion to feel like a family. We just needed each other. Ethan, Martha said one night as we unpacked boxes in our new living room, I don't know how to thank you. Her voice was softer, more at peace. You saved us. Mom, I said, giving her a small smile. You saved us. I just helped. My own journey, finding purpose. As for me, I finally felt free. For so long, I'd been holding everything together, watching over Martha and Lily, making sure Richard and Clara didn't ruin us. But now, I could breathe. I threw myself back into my work. Tech had always been my escape, and now I had the mental space to create without worrying about what disaster was waiting around the corner. I even started my own company, a cybersecurity firm, helping businesses protect their data from predators like, well, Richard and Clara. Irony? Maybe. But damn, it felt good. Lily's dream. My promise to her, Lily, had always been my motivation. When she told me she wanted to study robotics and AI, I knew I'd do whatever it took to help her succeed. You're going to change the world, Lily, I told her, ruffling her hair as she rolled her eyes. You're so cheesy, Ethan, but I meant it. Closure. Facing the past one last time. I'd be lying if I said I never thought about Richard. Sometimes, when I'd drive past the old neighborhood or see a news update about his failed attempts to rebuild his empire, the anger would creep back in. But then I'd remember, we won, he lost, and dwelling on the past, that wasn't my story anymore. A final goodbye to the past. One afternoon, I found a small box while unpacking the last of our things. Dad's old watch. It was one of the few things Richard and Clara hadn't managed to get rid of. I held it for a long time. Dad had sacrificed so much for us. And even though he was gone, his love was still here. I placed the watch in a glass case and set it on the shelf where it belonged. A reminder, not of what we lost, but of how far we'd come. Martha's new life, freedom at last. Martha didn't just reclaim her life, she flourished. She cut ties with toxic people and started focusing on herself. She traveled. She took painting classes. She even joined a book club and started making friends who weren't connected to Richard's world. For the first time in years, she was truly happy. A night to remember, a celebration of freedom on Martha's birthday that year. We threw her a surprise party. Nothing extravagant, just close friends, laughter, and love. As she blew out the candles, I could see it in her eyes. Relief, peace, freedom. Make a wish, Mom, Lily whispered. Martha smiled, but I had a feeling her wish had already come true. Ethan's reflection, the lesson learned. As for me, I learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about sacrifice. It's about standing by each other when things get messy. And it's about fighting for the people who matter most. Richard and Clara tried to destroy us, but in the end, we built something stronger. The final line, a new chapter begins. As I stood on the balcony of our new home, looking out over the city lights, I took a deep breath and let it all go. The past was behind us, and the future, it was ours to write. Story 2. Hi, I'm Nate, 27, a software developer living in the city. Life was smooth, at least for a while. I bought a cozy 3-bedroom house a year ago. It's nothing extravagant, but it's mine. I handle the mortgage, utilities, and all the expenses. My parents, Laura and Tim, both retired teachers in their late 50s, live with me. It was my way of giving back after all they had done for me. They were thrilled to be closer to the city, and I was happy to have them around. I claimed the master bedroom because, well, I paid for the house. It came with a private bathroom and a walk-in closet, my little sanctuary. I turned the second bedroom into my home office, where I spend most of my time working remotely. The third room, a guest room for family visits. Life was balanced, and everything was running smoothly until it wasn't. Enter the bombshell. It started one morning over breakfast. Mom casually mentioned that my older brother, Mike, 29, and his wife, Sarah, 27, were considering moving to the city. Apparently, things weren't going great for them. And to top it off, Sarah was pregnant. My initial thought, they'd get a small apartment nearby. I had no idea how wrong I was. A few days later, Mom cornered me after dinner. We invited Mike and Sarah to stay here for a while, she said, her voice soft, as if she was doing me a favor. Just until they get on their feet. Invited them? Without asking me? Before I could even react, Mike and Sarah showed up with their bags, And just like that, my quiet, structured life spiraled into chaos. No room for boundaries. The moment they settled in, I felt the shift. They treated my house like a free Airbnb with room service. I was covering all the bills, groceries, utilities, the mortgage, while Mike and Sarah lounged around. Mike was between jobs again, and Sarah's pregnancy became her excuse to do absolutely nothing. At first, I tried to be understanding. I mean, they were family. But Sarah's comments started getting under my skin. "This place is so big. You must spend hours cleaning it alone," she'd say, eyeing the spotless living room. Or worse, "When the baby comes, we'll need more space for all the stuff." The audacity. Things escalated quickly. One evening, Mike and Sarah cornered me in the living room. I expected them to offer to help with expenses, or at least apologize for adding more financial pressure. Instead, Sarah dropped a bombshell. "We were thinking," she began sweetly, "it makes more sense if we move into the master bedroom. You know, with the baby coming and all." "Excuse me?" Mike chimed in. "Your room has the walk-in closet and private bathroom. It's just logical, bro." I blinked, wondering if I was hallucinating. They wanted me to give up my own room? The room I paid for, in the house I owned? No way. I kept my cool. "Why not just stay in the guest room?" "It's pretty big," I said. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "But it doesn't have the closet space we'll need." I was done. "I'm not giving up my room. You can either stay in the guest room or find another place," I said, my voice firm. Mike looked stunned, as if the idea of me standing up for myself was unimaginable. Sarah? She was flat out offended. The downhill spiral from that moment on. Things went from bad to worse. Mike and Sarah made themselves at home too much. At home. Their stuff was everywhere. Baby magazines cluttered the dining table, and Sarah had already started talking about where the crib would go. They were planning a future in my house without my consent. I tried to keep the peace, but the tension was unbearable. I'd come back from a rare in-office meeting one day to find the house eerily quiet. Nobody tried to argue or guilt-trip me. I thought just for a moment that maybe they had finally realized I wasn't playing games. I was wrong. Decision time. That night, I barely slept. My mind was racing. I knew I had to take control of the situation before it got any worse. The next morning, I made the hardest decision I've ever had to make. I drafted eviction papers. I wasn't going to be disrespected in my own home. Not anymore. When I handed Mike and Sarah the notice, I expected fireworks. Instead, there was an uncomfortable silence that hung heavy in the air. The house felt different after that, like a ticking bomb. I had drawn the line. Now, I just had to wait and see if they would cross it. The morning after handing Mike and Sarah the eviction notice, the house felt off. I woke up earlier than usual, partly because I couldn't sleep, and partly because I was waiting for anything to happen. I half expected Mom to come knocking on my door, begging me to reconsider, or maybe Dad would try to guilt-trip me into changing my mind. But no one did. When I finally dragged myself to the kitchen for coffee, the house was silent. Too silent. No chatter, no passive-aggressive comments from Sarah, not even the sound of Mike clumsily rifling through the fridge. It was weird. The calm before the storm. As I sat there sipping my coffee, I started wondering, had they actually left? For a moment, I allowed myself to imagine that they'd quietly packed up and gone in the middle of the night. But no, that would have been too easy. Sure enough, Mom eventually wandered into the kitchen. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept much either. She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from me. For a while, we just sat there, the silence stretching between us. I could tell she wanted to say something, but she was struggling to find the right words. Finally, she spoke. "Honey, I know things have gotten complicated," she said softly, her eyes fixed on her coffee. I stayed quiet, giving her the space to say what she needed to. "I didn't realize how bad things had gotten between you and Mike," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. We thought we were helping." I raised an eyebrow. "Helping? By inviting them to take over my life without asking? I wasn't trying to make you feel like you didn't matter," she added, her voice trembling slightly. I took a deep breath, keeping my emotions in check. "But that's exactly how it felt, Mom," I said, my tone calm but firm. "You guys didn't ask me. You just decided. And then they acted like they owned the place." She looked down, nodding slowly. "You're right," she murmured. "We didn't think about how it would affect you." Damn right. The excuses start rolling in. And then came the usual defense. "Mike's never had it easy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's struggled more than you." I've heard this line my entire life. Mike was always the troubled one, the one who needed extra support. And because I was the responsible one, the one who had his life together. It felt like they assumed I could just carry the extra weight. Mom, I said, my frustration bubbling just below the surface. I bought this house. I pay for everything. The mortgage, the bills, the food. Do you really think I can keep doing that while supporting 4 adults and a baby? Her eyes finally met mine, and I could see the realization sinking in. She sighed, looking utterly defeated. You're right, she whispered again. We should have asked. The hard truth, I didn't ask for this, I said softly but firmly. I wanted to help you and Dad, because you took care of me for so long, but I can't support everyone, and I won't give up my own space just because Mike and Sarah refused to get their act together. I expected more pushback. I was ready for it, but instead, Mom just nodded. We'll figure something out, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I wasn't entirely convinced, but it was a start. Mike's meltdown. Later that afternoon, Mike finally decided to show his face. He looked pissed. I was sitting in the living room scrolling through emails when he plopped down across from me, arms crossed, jaw clenched. So, this is how it's gonna be? He said, his tone dripping with resentment. You're really gonna kick us out? I didn't even look up. I gave you a day, I said calmly. If you're still here tomorrow, I'm calling the police. Mike's face turned red. We're family, he spat, as if that automatically excused everything. Family doesn't take advantage of each other, I replied, meeting his gaze this time. Do you really think you can just take over my house and expect me to go along with it? For a moment, he just sat there, glaring at me. I could see the wheels turning in his head, trying to come up with some argument that would make me back down. But I wasn't going to budge. You know what? He finally muttered, shaking his head. Fine, whatever, good. A silent standoff for the rest of the day. The house was eerily quiet. Mike and Sarah mostly stayed in the guest room, probably sulking and plotting their next move. I didn't care. I had drawn the line, and I wasn't backing down. The next morning, I woke up early again. Today was the deadline. Either they left or I would take the next step. I wasn't bluffing. I walked into the kitchen, half expecting to see them still there, defying me. But instead, I found Dad sitting at the table, nursing a cup of coffee. They're leaving today, he said quietly, not looking up. I paused, surprised by how calm he sounded. Where are they going? I asked, my voice softer than I intended. For now, a motel, he said, his gaze still fixed on his coffee. Until they figure something out. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and guilt. I hated that it had come to this, but I also knew I couldn't let them continue taking advantage of me. The last straw by noon, Mike and Sarah had started packing. I stayed in my room, not wanting to deal with any more drama. But of course, that didn't last long. I heard footsteps in the hallway and then a knock on my door. It was Mike. When I opened the door, he was standing there, arms crossed, that same pissed-off expression plastered on his face. "You're really gonna let this happen?" he asked, his voice tense. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "I gave you options, Mike," I said evenly. "You chose this." He stared at me for a moment, as if waiting for me to change my mind. But when I didn't say anything else, he just shook his head and walked away. Goodbye and good riddance. The fallout. By late afternoon, they were gone. No dramatic goodbyes, no tearful apologies, just gone. The house was quieter than it had been in weeks. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. But the damage was done. I knew things wouldn't go back to normal overnight. My parents, especially Mom, were still processing everything. I could see the guilt in her eyes, even if she didn't say it out loud. And as much as I wanted to pretend everything was fine, I knew this was just the beginning of a long road toward rebuilding trust. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had stood up for myself. I had taken control of my own life again. And while the fallout was still unfolding, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let anyone take advantage of me again. The house felt empty. Not in a bad way, more like that quiet after a storm when everything is finally still. Mike and Sarah were gone. The tension that had been suffocating me for weeks had vanished. But the silence was different. It was a relief, sure, but it also left me with a weird sense of unease. I guess after living with so much chaos, my brain wasn't ready to accept that things were finally settling down. The awkward aftermath, Mom and Dad kept a low profile over the next few days. They weren't exactly avoiding me, but things were weird. Mom would pass by and give me these sad, apologetic looks. Dad barely said anything, which wasn't unusual, but this time, his silence carried a weight that was hard to ignore. We didn't talk about what happened. Not directly, anyway. Mom would ask if I needed anything from the store, or casually mention that she was thinking about reorganizing the living room, but we all knew those were just filler conversations. None of us were ready to address the elephant in the room, and honestly, I wasn't in a rush to bring it up either. I needed space, time, reclaiming my space. The first thing I did after Mike and Sarah left was reclaim my house. I'm not just talking about taking back my physical space. I mean emotionally reclaiming it too. I spent an entire day deep cleaning every inch of the house. It wasn't dirty, but I needed to scrub away every trace of their presence. I boxed up the leftover baby magazines and random crap they had left lying around and shoved it all into the garage. Out of sight, out of mind. Then I rearranged the living room just enough to make it feel like mine again. I moved my office desk slightly to the right, adjusted the furniture, and finally had space to breathe. My house, my rules. It felt good, like I was taking back control, but the real challenge was figuring out how to fix things with my parents. The conversation I knew was coming. About a week after Mike and Sarah left, Mom finally knocked on my door one evening. "Got a minute?" she asked softly, peeking in. I nodded, closing my laptop and motioning for her to come in. She sat on the edge of my bed, her eyes fixed on the floor like she was afraid to meet mine. I wanted to say I'm sorry," she started, her voice barely above a whisper. "For everything." I stayed quiet, letting her get it all out. "We didn't mean to make you feel like you didn't matter," she said, her voice cracking. "We thought we were helping Mike, but we didn't see how much it was hurting you." I could hear the guilt in her voice. And for the first time, I could tell she genuinely meant it. "It wasn't just about the house, Mom," I finally said, keeping my tone calm but firm. "It was about respect. I felt like none of you respected me or what I was doing to keep everything running." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I know, and we were wrong. It was weird." Hearing her say that out loud didn't erase all the frustration, but it was a step in the right direction. "I didn't mind helping," I continued, "but I couldn't keep sacrificing everything while they treated me like I didn't have a say in my own home." Mom wiped her eyes and gave me a small, sad smile. "We'll do better," she whispered. "I promise." For the first time in weeks, I felt some of the weight lift off my shoulders. Dad's quiet acknowledgement. Dad wasn't much of a talker, but a few days after my conversation with Mom, he made his feelings known in his own way. I was in the kitchen making coffee when he walked in, grabbed a mug, and stood beside me, silently stirring his drink. "I have been thinking a lot," he said after a long pause, his voice low and steady. I didn't say anything, just let him speak. I know I didn't say much when everything was happening, but I want you to know, I appreciate what you've done. He looked at me, his expression serious but sincere. "More than you know." That hit differently. Coming from Dad, those words carried a lot of weight. "Thanks, Dad," I said softly, not really knowing what else to say. He just nodded, taking a sip of his coffee before heading back to the living room. That was his way of saying we're good, and honestly, it was enough for me. The calm before, something. With Mike and Sarah gone and things finally starting to settle with my parents, I was hoping that life would go back to normal. And for a while it did. The house was quieter, peaceful. I threw myself back into work, spending hours in my home office, finally able to focus without distractions. I even started going out more, grabbing drinks with friends, exploring new restaurants in the city, and just living my life again. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake this feeling that it wasn't over. I hadn't heard a peep from Mike since he and Sarah left. No calls, no texts, nothing. And honestly, that worried me more than if he had blown up my phone. Mike wasn't the type to just let things go. In the silence, it felt too calm. An unexpected message. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I finally heard from him. I was in the middle of a work call when my phone buzzed. I glanced down and saw his name flash across the screen. Mike. I ignored it at first, letting it go to voicemail. But when I checked my phone later, there it was a text. "Hey, I know things went bad. I wanted to say I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of me was tempted to ignore it. I wasn't ready to reopen that wound, but another part of me, the part that still cared, even after everything. Maybe he had changed. Maybe. I took a deep breath and typed out a simple response. "I need time, but maybe." I didn't know what would happen next, but for now, I had done what I needed to do. I had set boundaries. I had reclaimed my life, and if Mike wanted back in, He was going to have to prove that he deserved it. Weeks passed after Mike's text, and honestly, I didn't feel any rush to respond. The house was finally calm, peaceful. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without that constant weight pressing down on my chest. No more walking on eggshells. No more passive-aggressive remarks from Sarah or awkward tension hanging in the air. Just quiet. Life moving forward. I threw myself into work, getting back to my usual routine. I was killing it at my job, new projects, promotions on the horizon, and for once, I had the mental space to actually enjoy it. I even started going out more, grabbing drinks with friends after work, exploring different spots in the city. It felt good to reclaim that part of my life. Mom and Dad were better. Things weren't perfect, but they were trying. Mom had backed off her constant worrying about Mike and started focusing more on herself. She took up gardening again, spending hours in the backyard, and Dad started volunteering at the local library. They were giving me space, respecting my boundaries, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like we were finding a new normal. But in the back of my mind, Mike's text was still there. The dreaded reunion I had put off seeing Mike as long as I could, but eventually, I knew I couldn't avoid it forever. It was Mom who finally brought it up one afternoon while we were sitting in the backyard. She was trimming her roses, her movements slow and methodical. "Have you thought about talking to Mike?" she asked, not looking up. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I don't know, Mom. I'm not sure I'm ready for that." She nodded, her eyes still focused on the roses. "I get it," she said softly, "but he's your brother." I knew she was right, and as much as I wanted to pretend that cutting him out was easier, a part of me still hoped. Maybe things could be different. The coffee meeting. I finally texted Mike back a week later. "Let's meet. Somewhere neutral." We agreed on a small coffee shop near my place. Nothing too formal. I didn't want to give the impression that we were just going to fall back into being brothers, like nothing had happened. When I walked in, he was already there, sitting at a corner table. He looked different. Tired. The usual cocky confidence wasn't there. He looked up when I walked in, and for a moment we just stared at each other. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice neutral as I sat down across from him. "Hey," he echoed, his voice quieter than I expected. The apology I didn't expect. There was an awkward silence as we both stared at our drinks. Neither of us knew how to start, but then, to my surprise, Mike spoke first. "I was a jerk," he said, his eyes downcast. I didn't realize how much we were putting on you." I raised an eyebrow but stayed quiet, letting him keep talking. I don't know, man. "I was scared," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "The baby, the bills, everything. I didn't know how to handle it, and instead of dealing with it, I took it out on you. I wasn't expecting that. I expected excuses, maybe some half-hearted apology, but this felt real. I'm sorry, Nate," he said finally, looking up at me. "For everything. For making you feel like your own house wasn't yours. For treating you like you didn't matter." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I took a deep breath, my emotions all over the place. I wanted to be angry, to remind him of how much he had hurt me. But seeing him like this, I realized holding on to that anger wasn't going to fix anything. "Thanks," I said softly. "I appreciate that. Setting boundaries." But just because he apologized didn't mean I was ready to let him back into my life without conditions. "I'm not saying everything's fine now," I added, my tone serious. "You crossed a lot of lines, Mike, and it's going to take time for me to trust you again." He nodded, his expression somber. "I get it. I'm not asking for everything to go back to how it was. I don't want to lose my brother." I didn't respond right away. I needed time to process everything. "I'm willing to try," I finally said, "but I need space and boundaries." "Whatever you need," he said quickly. "I get it." A slow start after that meeting. Things didn't magically go back to normal, and I didn't expect them to. Mike and I started talking more, but it was slow. Texts here and there, occasional check-ins, no pressure, and that was fine with me. I wasn't ready to let him back in fully, but at least we were talking. Mom and Dad were relieved, of course, but I made it clear that I wasn't going to just pretend everything was fine. I had learned my lesson. Boundaries mattered. Sarah's absence. Interestingly, Sarah didn't reach out, not once. From what I heard through Mom, she and Mike were still figuring things out, staying in a small apartment on the outskirts of the city. And honestly, I was okay with that. Sarah had never respected me or my space, and while I was open to repairing things with Mike, I wasn't in a hurry to do the same with her. one step at a time, rebuilding what was broken. Over the next few months, things started falling into place. Mike and I weren't as close as we used to be, but at least we were moving in the right direction. We had a long way to go, but there was progress. Mom and Dad, to their credit, were doing their best to give me space and respect my boundaries. The house felt like home again. I had control over my life, my space, my peace, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from me again. The final lesson. If there's one thing I learned through all of this, it's that respect isn't something you can demand, it's something that has to be earned. And sometimes standing up for yourself, even when it's hard, is the only way to make people realize that. I wasn't the same person who had let Mike and Sarah walk all over me. I had grown, I had learned, and now I was finally living life on my own terms. Moving on my way, Mike and I still had a lot of work to do. And maybe one day, things would fully go back to normal. But if they didn't, that was okay too. Because for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I needed to be.